A ship we don't recognise is flying along, though not happily. As well as lightning things happening to its shields, the inside of the bridge is a proper mess. Captain Shouty earns his name immediately, though can probably be forgiven based on the current circumstances. Whatever's happening to the shields is serious business, and the guy who's driving tells us they're going to fail and let in whatever's giving them a kicking. Captain Shouty's plan is to turn off the shields so that they can recharge them, which... yeah, alright then, let's see where you're going with this. Captain Shouty must have taken lessons from Janeway, as everybody has guns within easy reach. Once the shields are gone, a lilac circle appears, but Captain Shouty poops some yellow at it, causing it to bugger off. Another crew member isn't so lucky, blindsided by something that comes out of a different circle. Its touch is enough to make him a good fit for hosting Tales from the Crypt, and he does some falling over. Are we dealing with space vampires? Captain Shouty's luck runs out, and two of the lads that look a bit like Slimer from Ghostbusters rush him as the screen turns black. Voyager's received a distress signal, and we're taking it in astrometric so we can use the big screen. It features Captain Shouty, and it was sent a few hours back from a position relatively close to us. Which is odd, says Janeway, as his ship, the titular EQUINOX, was designed for checking out planets, not the sort of long-range stuff that would have brought it to the Delta Quadrant. We pop over to see if everything's alright, finding the EQUINOX much as we saw it before. Its shields are still doing that lightning thingy too, but at least it has shields, so Captain Shouty's plan must have worked. Janeway calls to find out what's happening, only to be interrupted by Captain Shouty, who tells her to use Voyager's shield to surround them. We move in to do so, and the Doctor hears something odd. Why is the Doctor on the bridge instead of sickbay preparing for casualties? Because it's a season finale and we want all the main cast together. That'll explain the presence of B'Elanna and Neelix too. Anywho, the noise he's heard is from wibbly portal things according to Seven, who's also on the bridge, obviously. Voyager's shield appears and the noise buggers off. Here's hoping none of the space vampires got in before then. We pop over with some away teams to find more copies of the Crypt Keeper. B'Elanna also finds a very weird warp core indeed, something she doesn't recognise. Other teams manage to find a couple of survivors, one under debris and another who does some pooping at Neelix. Our reputation must precede us. The last team arrives on the bridge. As an aside, this means every single department head and command officer is now off Voyager, by the way. There's got to be some sort of rule against that. Janeway and Tuvok take a poke around, finding Captain Shouty alive and in his chair. A quick chat establishes that they've been under attack for weeks from beings they've been unable to communicate with. Interestingly, the weird warp core stuff isn't how they ended up in the Delta Quadrant. As Janeway's explaining how Voyager got here, Captain Shouty says he knows about the caretaker. Looks like we're not the only ones who got fucked over by that banjo-strumming bell end. We're holding a wake/welcome party. Captain Shouty is commemorating all the people who've done a dead on his ship recently, and Janeway's giving out jobs to Voyager's crew so he can help with repairs and figure out what was attacking them too. Before the driver on the EQUINOX, who also happens to be their first officer, gets to work with Tuvok and Seven, he wants to say hi to B'Elanna. His name's Burke, and I'd normally have given him a different one, but the Cockney rhyming slang connotations of that feel appropriate, so we're keeping it. He and B'Elanna knew each other from the academy, very intimately from the sounds of it, and he tries to arrange dinner with her later. She turns it into a group event by inviting Kim and Paris too, who's already being a jealous arse. As Burke departs, he gives B'Elanna a gentle pat on the stomach, which was definitely not really fucking weird. That might explain Paris's defensive behaviour, perhaps like recognises like. Another of the EQUINOX crew catches up with Chakotay for a chat. Ensign Nervous has been put on a team to work over on the EQUINOX, but would prefer to stay here for a while. Their journey has been somewhat more traumatic than our own, and she'd like a change of scenery. Chakotay agrees, though a change may not be as good as the rest in this case. A panic attack in the turbolift, something she's not used for months because of those space vampires, causes her to leave and take the Jeffries tubes instead. Getting the EQUINOX spaceworthy again might take more than simply repairing the ship. We may have forgotten all about those space vampires, but they've not forgotten about us. They've been banging on the shield all this time, each knock weakening it slightly. We've got maybe a couple of days before they break through and make some more corpses. We learn that each one can only be here for a few seconds, which rather raises the question of why they're doing it. Perhaps they just really like cuddles. Seven thinks keeping them here beyond what seems comfortable may make them reconsider what they're doing. Handily, that's something the EQUINOX has been working on, presumably to try and nab one so they can figure out how to stop it. Janeway wants to see how their experiment went, but Captain Shouty tells her that's not possible as the lab it's in was irradiated during an attack. That feels like a bit of a coincidence to me, but he says they've got the designs on a computer, so he and Janeway go off to use those instead. While they work over on the Equinox, they compare experiences. From the sounds of things, Captain Shouty got the shit end of the stick. Half his crew carked it in the first week, but he didn't have any marquee to press gang into service, like Voyager did. It's also a lower-spec ship that was never designed to be on long missions. It's only got this far through luck and finding a wormhole. And perhaps something else, too. He asks Janeway how many times she's broken the Prime Directive for her crew, and that feels like quite the loaded question to me. Her response is never, which, well, we're all entitled to our opinions, aren't we? Captain Shouty admits he's come close a few times, but says he's always stayed on the right side. Based on the conversation he has later with Burke, one where he says this crew won't understand the dodgy shit what they done, I suspect his approach to the Prime Directive is even more dubious than Janeway's. The crew member that Seven rescued along with Kim over on the Equinox has come to give her a hand. He doesn't get the chance as the distinctive whine associated with space vampires is heard and we get ready for pooping. The little buggers have changed tactics, focusing on one shield in particular to drain it quicker. A bit of science fixes it, but who knows what they might try next. That's why we need a plan, and Seven has one. She's fiddled with the schematics of the trap that the Equinox was working on, and thinks she can make it work with Voyager's field generator. The result would be a system capable of grabbing any of the invaders automatically. Unfortunately, it's going to take 14 hours to implement, and Ensign Nervous doesn't like those numbers. There is a solution, though. Get everybody on Voyager so we only have to protect one ship. That'll cut the work and time in half, apparently. Captain Shouty's not fond of the plan and tries to argue it, but Janeway has seniority due to some obscure Starfleet bullshit, and he reluctantly agrees. Just as soon as he, and presumably the rest of his crew, can go over there to collect some personal items. They're also collecting some non-personal items from here, too, by the looks of things. Burke is fucking about in engineering, downloading a copy of the design Seven made for the field whatsit. He's not supposed to be here, a fact B'Elanna tells him when she finds him. He lies about his purpose before trying to organise another date. She's not in the market, perhaps realising that Burke is the one human in the Delta Quadrant who's more of a dodgy scumbag than Tom Paris. His distraction is successful, though, and he scarpers with the data. Maybe not everybody is as committed to the Equinox as Captain Shouty and Burke. Ensign Nervous seems genuine in her chat about moving supplies to Voyager, and uncomfortable at lying about the warp gubbins that Captain Shouty didn't want Voyager to know about. Maybe she could be convinced with the right push. That makes Naomi's timing impeccable. She's come to introduce herself and make sure that Ensign Nervous has everything she needs. She's also now calling herself the captain's assistant, which I guess technically qualifies as getting a promotion before Harry Kim. Tangentially, Admiral-level patrons are given the chance to name a minor recurring character on the show. Our most recent has chosen Naomi, not to rename her, but to protect her name from change. As such, Naomi Wildman is now called Naomi Wildman, sponsored by Admiral Chris Davis. Her official introduction complete, Captain's assistant Naomi Wildman leaves to perform other duties. Ensign Nervous wasn't aware we had kids on the ship, and it reminds her of a nephew back home. If this was her chance to be open with us, we lose it when Captain Shouty calls her back to the Equinox. Captain Shouty and Burke have decided they're going to rob Voyager and are sharing the plan. Part 1. They nab the field generator from Voyager that's being modified for trapping those alien bastards. Part 2. They make themselves scarce, which is an interesting choice when Voyager is much faster, but maybe they're hoping the aliens will keep us busy. Ensign Nervous and the guy Seven saved don't seem so convinced, a position perhaps not helped by the plan they're being given. In fact, maybe moving over to Voyager isn't such a bad idea after all. Captain Shouty manages to talk them round, probably due in no small part to him saying they'll be home soon. I guess that explains the weird warp core stuff, and the fact that he didn't want to share the data with Janeway means it must be proper dodgy to boot. It might also explain how they plan to outrun Voyager. As they're preparing for Grand Theft Gizmo, we're getting that trap set up. Seven says there's a problem with the Equinox research lab, which is odd as I thought the whole point of abandoning the ship was because we weren't going to cover it. Regardless, Seven does some poking and discovers it's still highly irradiated, and the reason for that is because it's being done deliberately. Janeway thinks that's suspicious but doesn't want to do anything without knowing more, and the radiation is too dangerous to take a look. Too dangerous for meatbags anyway. Thankfully, we have a mobile photonic lifeform who can go instead. What he finds is some full-on evil scientist bollocks, including one of those creatures. What's left of it, anyway, as they've been doing science shit to it that converts the meat into high-energy crystals. And from the looks of some files he finds, it's not the first time they've done it either. That'll explain their weird warp core, and probably why the space vampires have been attacking them too. Captain Shouty and Burke have finished preparations, and are off back to the EQUINOX so they can teleport Voyager's field generator aboard. Tuvok has other ideas, and in a shocking display of competent security, we manage to take them into custody. Janeway lays the evidence before Captain Shouty, and he at least has the good grace to not deny it. Instead, he explains why. Shit was going very pear-shaped for the EQUINOX and its crew. Just as things looked hopeless, they met a species who helped them out, and blessed them with a ritual involving spirits. Only the spirits were alien life forms and, according to scans, were spitting out a shitload of energy. They traded for a device to summon them, which is an odd thing for a species who places religious significance on them to do, but let's ignore that for now, and trapped one in the chamber that the doc found. The original plan was just to study it, and that turned into an autopsy when the alien carked it. Just like Neelix's meatloaf surprise, they decided there's no point in wasting a good corpse. In fact, they discovered they could refine it and use it as fuel. He says the resulting speed boost carried them over 10% of the way home. Faced with numbers like that, what's a captain to do? Janeway thinks that's not a good enough excuse to commit murder, perhaps considering herself an expert witness on the topic. Regardless, Captain Shouty's being confined to quarters, and so is his crew. She's also sending Seven to deconstruct the weird warp gubbins on the EQUINOX, and the doc to grab as much data as possible. If we can figure out a way to talk to the space vampires, maybe they'll accept our apology for murderizing a shitload of them. An attempt at diplomacy may rest on what the doc can find over on the EQUINOX. He discovers that anything useful is locked away, but he has a pretty good chance of getting along with the person holding the key. After introductions and a brief explanation of the mobile emitter, he tells Equidoc that the experiments being performed here were illegal. That's no surprise to Equidoc, what with him having been the one to implement them after the crew deleted his morals. As if to prove it, he bashes the doc's mobile emitter, and, after the doc fades out, takes hold of it. As the doc's taking a nap, it's all kicking off over on Voyager. The space vampires have renewed their efforts, and we don't have much time. Tuvok's getting the trap ready, but Janeway wants an alternative and gives the doc a call. One of them, anyway. Either our doc woke up, or Equidoc figured out how to use the mobile emitter and came over to Voyager. He tells Janeway that he's not got anything to help with translation yet, before asking the computer where Captain Shouty is being held. That answers the question of who we're looking at, then. We go to where the EQUINOX crew are being held, and Equidoc tells the guards that the prisoners are infected with a virus. I'd checked that with the boss of security myself, but these guards haven't been given a talking part, so they can't. Come to think of it, maybe that's the reason why security is such complete dogshit on Voyager. One guard follows Equidoc in at least, so they're not completely incompetent. Sadly, neither is Equidoc, and he's brought some toys with him. The other guard at the door, which he closed behind his mate, hears pooping and, instead of raising an alarm, opens the door. He gets some yellow pooped at him for his trouble and takes a nap. Kim's on the ball, though, and notices there's significantly more pooping going on than there should be. Janeway sends more security, but I won't hold my breath. More bad news arrives. The trap Tuvok's trying to use has been disconnected as part of Captain Shouty's plan to nick it. We won't be using it until we plug it back in again. In fact, we won't be using it at all. Captain Shouty and the others escape, save for Equidoc, who turns off the mobile emitter, which falls to the floor. They teleport back to the EQUINOX and, despite threats and a bit of pooping from Janeway, manage to nick Voyager's field emitter. That's point 1 of the plan complete, but point 2 might be a problem. Legging it requires warp speed, and Seven was over there disconnecting the weird warp gubbins. Ensign Nervous has sorted her out, but it'll take a minute to plug things back in. Shields go down and the space vampires break through on both ships. The EQUINOX has managed to get the part they nicked working and trap their invader, but Voyager isn't so lucky. Everyone on the bridge starts pooping as the EQUINOX changes course and legs it, their engines now online. While they're scarpering, a space vampire manages to get the drop on Janeway, and we're told the story is to be continued. Before we get on to the episode itself, we've got to address the elephant. Janeway tells Captain Shouty that she's never broken the Prime Directive, and that's a real fucking generous interpretation of past events. The list currently scrolling by has the ones I've spotted separated into definite and maybe. There are also some bonus categories for the potential infractions by people under her command, as well as time fuckery too. And there's the one where the Prime Directive was overruled, so she gets that one for free. Even if we discount all of the questionable ones, then by my count there are still 4 definites. Of course, you could argue that this list proves how utterly unenforceable the Prime Directive is in practice, despite its admirable intent, but that's a whole other conversation. To the plot itself, and I think it comes under the heading of "There but for the grace of God, go I." Had Janeway been dealt such a shitty hand right from the start, can we say it would have played out any differently for her? We already know she's taken some unorthodox steps in her quest to get them home, up to and including an actual fucking murder. Viewed through the lens of Janeway's past adventures, Captain Shouty is, if anything, a natural extension of that logic. Janeway turned up to 11, if you will. He's doing what's necessary to get his people home, the most sacred duty of a captain as far as both he and Janeway seem to be concerned. And before you balk at that comparison, let's remember she was good with giving the Borg biological weapons. At least Captain Shouty had the conscience to calculate exactly how many lives he'd have to take in order to get his people home. Janeway, on the other hand, was willing to leave that number up to the collective. All of which sounds like Janeway bashing, but that's not my point. My point is that the principles of the Federation are easy to enforce when you have the luxury of a whole military complex backing you up. Playing the hand you're dealt is a whole lot easier when you can draw more cards from the deck. Unless you're playing Uno, I suppose. We're essentially talking about the hierarchy of needs, the motivational theory attributed to Abraham Maslow. Even if you've no interest in psychology, you've probably seen the pyramid. In short, the theory is that if your basic needs aren't met, more abstract concepts such as morality are harder to achieve. Ideals promoted by the Federation might be the fabled gold capstone on top of the pyramid, but just as in ancient Egypt, that means they're the first to get nicked. There's some skillful writing in this one. Take the Prime Directive question itself and the care with which it's crafted. Not "have you ever," but "how many times?" It's something that could easily be missed if the answer's 0, but leaves the door open for maybe just a couple, for the crew. It places a subtle expectation on the answer being non-zero, an indicator that the person asking it would be understanding of such a response. This comes after the speech from Captain Shouty about occasionally forgetting that they were explorers and sometimes even human. Again, another prompt for Janeway to chip in if she'd ever acted the same way. It's a well-played effort to feel how open Janeway would be to a less Starfleet approach, and it does a good job of subtle foreshadowing too. Either that's a happy coincidence or someone put in the effort to consider how Captain Shouty would approach the situation. We'll assume the latter and give some points. There is a problem with a plot element that we should note. Why does this plan involve abandoning the EQUINOX? I get that defending it with the trap is the lesser of the 2 tactical options, but that doesn't require casting it adrift. Simply leave it undefended while you solve the current problem, then repair it and travel in convoy. It's odd that Janeway doesn't see this as an option, but of course we need the abandonment plot point to provoke the theft. I could also point out that the numbers of the speed boost don't add up, by the way. If one corpse got them a 10,000 light-year boost and they only have 35,000 left to go, the total he gives of needing 63 more corpses doesn't make any sense. We'll choose to see that not as a technical error, but an indicator that Captain Shouty might have been a bit more proactive in gathering corpses for that first flight. All in all, it's a pretty solid finale to the season, and does enough to keep people interested in the conclusion, even if that shot at the end did feel a bit like a cliffhanger from the 1960s Batman TV show. End of episode. You know, with hindsight, I'm starting to think that maybe two cartoon dogs asking leprechauns to divert smoke through the vents of a magic spaceship probably wasn't the most solid plan to begin with. Woof.